Every morning, millions of Americans stand in line for a $5 coffee, while quietly believing it is destroying their financial future. For decades, the entire personal finance industry has pointed at that little cup and called it the reason ordinary people never get rich. Skip the latte, the experts said, and any barista-loving American could supposedly retire a millionaire on the savings alone. But that advice is one of the most misleading ideas ever sold to the American public. And the math proves it. Because while everyone was busy feeling guilty about coffee, three much bigger decisions were quietly deciding their entire financial lives. This is the story of the $5 coffee lie, why it spread, and the three choices that actually matter. The idea has a name, and it took off in the early 2000s when a popular finance author made it famous. The pitch was seductively simple, and it landed on American ears at exactly the right cultural moment. Take the $5 a person spends on coffee, invest it instead, and compounding will supposedly turn it into a fortune. The story spread everywhere. Therefore, an entire generation grew up believing wealth was hiding inside their daily cup. Talk shows repeated it, books were built on it, and parents lectured their kids about it at kitchen tables across America. But almost nobody ever stopped to actually run the numbers. And the numbers tell a very different story. So here is the honest math, laid out plainly, with no motivational fog wrapped around it. $5 a day adds up to roughly $1,800 a year, which admittedly sounds like real money. Invested every single day for 30 straight years at average market returns, it grows to somewhere around $200,000. That is not nothing, but it demands 3 decades of perfect, joyless discipline without missing a single day. Meanwhile, the average American who buys a home at the wrong price can lose that much money in a handful of years. Therefore, the coffee was never the problem. It was simply the easiest thing to see and the easiest thing to blame. There is a reason the small stuff gets all the attention, while the big stuff hides in plain sight. A $5 purchase happens every day, so it feels constant, visible, and emotionally loud inside a person's mind. But a mortgage gets signed once, a car gets financed once, and then those decisions go silent for years. The human brain judges spending by frequency, not by size. Therefore, the daily coffee feels bigger than the monthly housing payment. It is like worrying about a dripping faucet while the basement quietly fills with water from a burst pipe. The drip is annoying and audible, but the pipe is what actually sinks the house. And there is a darker reason the coffee myth survived for so long in American culture. Blaming lattes puts the entire weight of financial struggle on tiny personal choices instead of enormous structural ones. It is far more comfortable to lecture people about coffee than to talk about wages, housing costs, and healthcare bills. Therefore, the myth kept spreading because it flattered the people giving the advice and shamed the people receiving it. But shame has never built a single retirement account, and guilt has never paid off a single mortgage. So now the real question becomes obvious, and it is the question this entire story has been building toward. If the coffee does not matter, what actually does? And where should an ordinary American aim their attention instead? The answer comes down to 3 decisions, and together they control more money than 10,000 skipped lattes ever could. Number 1, housing. Housing is the single largest expense in almost every American budget, swallowing a third of the typical paycheck or more. For millions of households, it quietly consumes 40 or even 50% of everything they earn each month. Therefore, no amount of coffee discipline can ever rescue a budget that is drowning in an oversized housing payment. Here is where the trap usually springs, and it happens on one of the happiest days of a person's life. A bank approves a family for the absolute maximum loan they can technically survive, and it feels like a compliment. The real estate agent smiles, the number sounds impressive, therefore, the family stretches to the very edge of that approval. But a maximum approval was never a recommendation. It was simply the outer limit of what the bank could legally extract. The difference between a comfortable payment and a maximum payment can easily be $800 every single month. That gap equals more than 5 lattes a day, every day, for the entire life of a 30-year loan. One signature on one document outweighs 9,000 trips to the coffee shop. And nobody frames it that way. Therefore, the person who buys slightly less house than they can afford wins the game before it even starts. They invest the difference, they breathe easier, and they never once have to feel guilty about a cappuccino again. Number 2, the car. If housing is the biggest decision, the car is the most emotionally dangerous one in all of American life. No country on earth ties identity to the driveway quite like America, and the marketing machine knows it perfectly. The average new car payment in America has climbed past $700 a month, which is a staggering number. Add insurance, gas, and maintenance, and many households are pouring over $1,000 monthly into a machine that loses value. Because that is the brutal secret of the car. It is the single most expensive depreciating object most people ever buy. A new car can shed 20% of its value in the first year, before the second oil change even happens. Therefore, the buyer is paying full price, plus interest, for something that is actively evaporating in the parking lot. But the industry discovered something clever, and it changed the way Americans think about cars forever. Dealers stopped selling cars and started selling monthly payments, stretching loans to 6 and even 7 years to shrink the number. The payment looks smaller, therefore the buyer feels richer, while the total cost quietly balloons behind the curtain. Millions of Americans now trade in vehicles they still owe money on, rolling old debt into new debt like a snowball. Meanwhile, the person who drives a reliable, paid-off car for 10 years builds wealth almost by accident. The difference between a luxury payment and a modest one, invested over a working lifetime, can exceed $500,000. $500,000 decided not in a coffee line, but on a dealership floor on a single Saturday afternoon. Therefore, the car a person chooses at 25 can matter more than every beverage they buy until 65. Number 3, lifestyle inflation. This final decision is the sneakiest of the three, because it never announces itself, and it never sends a bill. Lifestyle inflation is what happens when a person's spending automatically rises to match every raise they ever receive. The new job pays $10,000 more, therefore the apartment gets bigger, the car gets newer, and the vacations get longer. On paper, the income doubled, but somehow the savings account looks exactly the same as it did years ago. This is why plenty of Americans earning 6 figures still live paycheck to paycheck, genuinely confused about where it all goes. The problem was never the size of the income. It was that the lifestyle was programmed to eat every dollar of growth. But here is the beautiful flip side, and it is the closest thing to a cheat code that exists in personal finance. Every raise is a fork in the road, a clean windfall of money that no existing habit has claimed yet. The person who banks even half of every raise builds wealth without cutting a single thing from their current life. They sacrifice nothing they already enjoy. They simply decline to inflate. Therefore, saving never feels like punishment. Over a career of promotions and job changes, that one quiet habit can outperform decades of aggressive coupon clipping. Because getting rich was never about shrinking a small life. It was about refusing to supersize a growing one. Now step back and look at what these 3 decisions have in common, because the pattern is the entire lesson. The house, the car, and the raise are each decided in a single moment, maybe a handful of times per decade. They are quiet, infrequent, and enormous, while the coffee is loud, daily, and tiny. Therefore, the entire $5 coffee lie was a case of perfectly backwards attention. Americans were trained to sweat the decisions they make 300 times a year and sleepwalk through the ones they make 3 times a decade. Get those rare decisions right, and the daily ones barely matter at all. Get those rare decisions wrong, and no amount of home-brewed coffee will ever dig the budget out of the hole. There is one more twist worth knowing, and it is the part the frugality industry never liked to mention. Extreme penny pinching carries a hidden cost of its own, and psychologists have a name for it. Every tiny spending decision a person agonizes over burns willpower, and willpower is a limited daily resource. The person exhausted from debating a $3 purchase has less mental energy left for the decisions worth thousands. Therefore, obsessive frugality can actually backfire, draining the exact focus needed for the choices that truly matter. The $5 coffee, it turns out, might be one of the cheapest sources of daily joy money can buy. A small, warm ritual that costs $1,800 a year is a bargain compared to a bad mortgage that costs $80,000. So the smartest money advice is almost insultingly simple, and it fits on the back of a coffee sleeve. Buy the home below the approval, drive the car past the loan, and bank a piece of every single raise. Do those three things, and the daily latte becomes a rounding error instead of a moral failure. Because financial freedom was never hiding at the bottom of anyone's coffee cup. It was sitting inside 3 signatures, waiting for someone to finally read the fine print. So tomorrow morning, when that $5 coffee slides across the counter, there is no reason to feel a shred of guilt. The coffee was never the lie worth worrying about. The lie was that it ever mattered at all.